Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we are 10 minutes late, and this is enough to begin our session. I would like to welcome everyone here at our session, and I will be introducing them as they will be given the word. You cannot hear me. You're saying you cannot hear me. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'll try not to swallow my microphone. Dear friends, we are beginning our session, and it looks like we have enough people here in the audience. And Mikhail Dmitriev will join us, all the more that he was actually advertising this session before. I would like to begin with this short introductory speech. Not being a lawyer myself and thinking logically, I would say that the Russian Federation, although it's a federated state, but in fact it is not a federated state, still Russia is the country of cities. Neither judging by our legislative basis nor by our economic structure, the constituent territories of Russia are not playing the role which is played by the cities. It's not even the cities, but the biggest agglomerations are actually the points where we generate our growth. And now, as we're engaging into discussion about the trends and prospects for economic growth, we can see one main limiting factor is decrease of the able-bodied population in Russia. And in terms of counteracting to this trend, it's an internal migration that can leverage that to the points of economic growth, and definitely these would be big cities and cities agglomerations in Russia. And I believe that here we could discuss today to discuss, among other things, the topics which have been put in our agenda. And I would like, these issues are known to everyone, and I would like to give the floor to the first one, Vlad Stolarov, the managing partner of the Sputnik, with his presentation about the backbone agglomerations of Russia, the areas of potential developments, and to present us results of his research. Vladimir, thank you very much. Good morning to your colleagues. Indeed, for over half a year, we have been doing a research which was initiated by now governor of the Perm region. The donor of the research is the government of Moscow. It has been initially planned that a number of products will be offered and discussed at this Moscow Urban Forum. And yesterday, for quite a long time, we have been deliberating about global outcomes that we can make out of this research, what Moscow and St. Petersburg's are looking like against the backdrop of the biggest agglomerations in our country. And today I think we'll ground our conversation to the map of the biggest Russian agglomeration, cities with over 1 million people of population. And I would like to kindly ask each and every one of you who would like to dig deeper and to get different layers and different results of this research, which continues today. And I believe that you and I will be filling up this database for the next months to come. Well, the main results and outcomes are at our stand. You can come and see them firsthand, where we have all the multimedia system available to you. You can use it, you can get information. Please familiarize yourself with it. I believe that this is the very, very good information to compare it with many non-Russian. And I will also would like to advertise agglomerations.ru as the platform which aggregates all this data, and we're going to fill it up, answering to your questions and the questions which have been presented by Vladimir Mao as the moderator of this session. I will in part be using the data that we have received through our research. What has to be mentioned about the backbone agglomerations in Russia and their potential for the Russian strategy? My clicker, my pointer doesn't seem to be working. Well, now it is. First of all, I think it is important. Colleagues, I need your assistance with this technical thing. Or maybe we could ask our technical personnel to help me with switching my slides, please. Well, again, it's well known that the Russian spatial strategy, it has important inputs and important factors. It should be the growth-oriented strategy, and the rate of growth should overpass the global ones, which means that we have to aim ourselves at 3.5 to 4% growth per annum. How can we attain this rate of growth? Speaking of our spatial theory. Oh, excuse me, but as a moderator, I would like to say something that I fully support, that Russia has to be growing above Germany and below China, the global average. But the main idea that we should not give the numbers, because the Russian economy and the global economy can be growing at any rate. But please do not target this growth, neither 3.4 nor 4%, but a little bit above the global average. Okay, we got a deal. And again, for our spatial strategy, it means that we are going to develop in more polarized way, in less uniform way, and it looks like we are going to place a special bet on the stronger Russian regions, on the more urbanized Russian regions, and on the big cities, respectively. This process, which is visualized now in this graph, or octopus, if you will, in the right upper corner of my slide, we've been showing this trend for a number of years and nothing seems to be changing. It looks like we are living in the kind of country where the mid and small towns are going to get smaller, while the bigger ones are going to be the beneficiaries of these internal migration processes. And the only question is, what is our take on this trend? And how and why we may counteract this trend, and how and why we may right this natural trend. Are we trying to make people stay in places where they would not like to stay, or we are trying to get ready megapolises for the ever-increasing influx of the people from the smaller towns and cities? I think we have to make the open bet on the second, the latter trend. But first I would like to mention a couple of words about Moscow and St. Petersburg's agglomerations. I would like to flip you through the slides. Yesterday we've been discussing a lot about that, and I think that today we are going to continue deliberation of that. Moscow and St. Petersburg agglomerations are the global players indeed, and their trend of development is defined by the global trends, which are related to the very doctrine of 600 cities, which has again been discussed on the plenary session, and the whole discourse that we are moving from concentration to hyper-concentration of the labor resources. And I think Moscow and St. Petersburg on the global map are affected by this trend. Although this is not the topic of our presentation, but we've done some analysis of the real borders of the Moscow and St. Petersburg agglomerations. We have involved data of all the cellular network operators in our country to this work, and now on the website and in our booth you'll be able to interact with this data. The only thing I will say that both research regarding Moscow and St. Petersburg, they do confirm the otherwise very clear strategic ideas and concerns that along the ring roads we have excessive concentration of residential housing, which is not added by the jobs, by the workplaces, and vice versa. Downtowns of the cities are overloaded with too many jobs, and on the other hand, they do not have enough residential spaces. In St. Petersburg, situation seems to be a bit more balanced in both in the center and on the periphery. But efforts of the governments of the Moscow and that of St. Petersburg and Leningrad region are aimed at fitting the residential places with smart jobs, and otherwise the cores of the cities, they have to be more densified in terms of the offer of the residential spaces. I think it's a very, very right strategy. And now shall we move on to the Russian agglomerations, and now we're going to engage a quite interesting conversation politically and economically. Thinking of Russian agglomerations, we have taken within the scope of our first analysis a certain set of Russian cities: Novosibirsk, Rostov, Samara, Yekaterinburg, Vladivostok, Kazan, Makhachkala, and Tolyatti. Why? Because these cities are indeed the backbone network of the Russian cities with over 1 million people in them. And secondly, they have been the focus, or should I say the subjects, of establishing the very first territorial planning schemes in 2014. You may remember the end of 2014, when all of a sudden the whole range of Russian cities have gotten the schemes of territorial planning in view of agglomeration strategy, and it was interesting for us to take a look at this formal understanding of Russian agglomerations, just how it is, to what extent it is matching a reality. I'll say again, we have been using a methodology of OECD. We have approved this methodology in OECD, and we have included in real borders of agglomerations any municipality where the 15% of population is migrating to the core of agglomeration. It's a pendulum migration. I think that this model would be the most applicable to, at least to the European part of Russia. And also, what have we seen as a result of this effort? We have noticed a picture which enables us to think about many things. The highlighted in blue in the upper right corner, this is the territory of agglomerations of the 37 million residents of Tokyo, Japan. We're giving you this space of how these schemes of territorial planning are done. And then you can see Novosibirsk, Tolyatti, Samara, Rostov, Perm, Yekaterinburg, and others. I mean, you can see the Tokyo with its 37 million. You can fit in any of these agglomerations. You can juxtapose or put on top of it, and calling things what they are, it's a lie. And territories of agglomerations of Russian million cities with 1 million population are territories with very low density. They do not have any agglomeration trends in the global notion of this trend. Now, what are the real agglomerations that as we have them in the Russian Federation? Again, I'll say on agglomerations.ru you can see all the layers related to jobs and residential spaces and population density. You'll see all that information, but still, in reality, we have agglomerations which are very, very compact. On one hand, they have very low density of population, if not to say very widespread. And actually, we've seen in each of the big Russian cities, it's in internal and external agglomerations. So the internal agglomerations, it's really, really a lot of work in terms of being able to and need to modernize the city in intensive, not extensive way. We have to transform its internal spaces. And of course, this would be the long time effort, and we have to do this, and not by extensively just adding towns and villages and whatever to each big city, and thus trying to make them into an agglomeration. As we've analyzed that, you know that in our study we have looked into not only a huge number of agglomerations level of New York, London, Shanghai and others we've taken into our scope, is also this range of 1 to 2, 3 million people cities, and we can see that absolutely different density between the nucleus and the periphery of each of the global agglomerations, and this is the main outcome of our research. Now, what benchmarks, what financial benchmarks we have when making comparison between all of these agglomerations? Well, it is not a secret that the Russian major cities are in a horrible financial situation. I mean, barely any of them have any budgets for development, and they do not nearly compare with the challenges that these cities are facing. And whenever we're speaking about strategic bet on developing some backbone network of Russian cities, let's say the 15 biggest Russian cities or 20 Russian cities, however you slice it, we're speaking about allocating very serious financial resources. And in my evaluation, for a Russian city with a million population, the annual investment is like 30, 50, 70 billion Russian rubles for the next 10 to 15 years would be what it takes. It's a must. It's a norm. We have to go back into our cities with certain upgrade and modernization plans, and I believe it's a certain national program that have to be initiated, beginning with $500 billion Russian rubles, and when these cities will really feel this impact of these investments and a momentum on a federal level. Next, what have we seen? Trying to sum up this picture in this situation, we're seeing the growth of the spread in the cities. We have not finished. We have not even started the post-industrial transformation, which basically was finished in the major cities of European cities. We have hundreds and hundreds of factories of non-modernized areas. There is no industry, but on the other hand, we have not initiated any post-industrial jobs or housing in them. And I believe that my perspective on the development of the major Russian cities is can be fully described by the upper row on this slide. What you're seeing, that is, we've been creating a huge number of concrete buildings as a greenfield production in the field. So we've been trying to do this. But on the other hand, we were not working on the agglomerations from the inside. There is upgrading the hundreds of hectares of the Golden Mile land, which are close to city cores and rivers, etc. I think it's something in our national mentality.
We're in for developing extensively. And the cities and towns have become a platform where we're developing as we've used to. So we are constructing a lot, and we're going on constructing even more. Unfortunately, the tempo of construction in our cities and towns are far behind Beijing and other major cities of the world. But the most important thing is what we're going to construct and where. And I think we should trend to the center. Whether we want it or not, the industrial parts of big cities will diminish, giving way to service, cultural, educational, innovation, and touristic issues and facilities. Clear enough, the industry, the hard industry, has nearly gone from big cities. We can admit it or we cannot admit it, but it is this reality. No wonder I like collecting this kind of websites for modernization. And these are the sites of construction. I think that each of you has your own collection of this kind of construction sites. And observing what is happening in big cities, there are a lot of hectares and hectares of sites and lands which are ready for investment. This is not a unique situation. Actually, this is what has already occurred in London, in Japan, and you can see projects of what has happened in this city. Some stories are already legendary. So what exists there and what we don't have yet? They require agencies who are professionals in development and modernization. So the land developer should be part of the city and should be responsible of changing one picture to another one. We've learned to set up institutions, national institutions and corporations for development of anything. So we have anything we need to have in the world of capitalism. But we are still lacking in the most important institute for land development. And these are the city corporations for development and modernization. And this will not occur on its own. Business will not do this job for the national institutions and the state officials. This is what we've got to develop. Otherwise, nothing will occur. And thank you very much. Sorry for taking so much time. But that's okay that you have taken more time. Let's now go on discussing. Maxim Reshetnikov has already been mentioned today, and he's also the executor, and he also constructs a lot of facilities in the Europe. So could you comment how you are going on developing in Perm? Because it is the agglomeration of Saratov and the agglomeration of Perm. These are agglomerations quite typical for the Russian Federation, and they consume also villages. And do you think their way of development is similar to the way of Moscow area development and Moscow agglomeration? Thank you very much, my dear colleagues. So first and foremost, I would like to comment what Bulat has said. And I absolutely agree with him that the development of agglomerations requires a different approach to it. And here there are controversial issues between our liberal city code, which starts with the legislation, and then they say business will come and construct different things. But will the business come, and when, and how? And this is the issue of priority. And we don't have the mechanisms of priority forming. They are not stated in the regulation. And sometimes what the private owner thinks, right, it should be done. But if we want to manage the agglomerations consequently and open-mindedly, then we need different approaches. And there are two great, most successful examples, Moscow and Kazan. These are cases which have started from the opposite way. Each of them has started going their own way. So the construction code actually was not fulfilled there. Tatarstan have their model of managing, which is quite vertical. Let us think about this instrument in a more considerate way. Well, competing and balancing of competition is another important issue. Moscow is quite a wealthy region. There are other regions less wealthy than Moscow, but we need to develop in a balanced way, so the regions should compete. The regions do compete, but for what? All of them have advantages and disadvantages. And first and foremost, they compete for jobs. And here, the situation is quite clear. We know what priorities are and who to attract where. Still, in whatever sphere we have jobs, new jobs, let us think about the future. We very often invest 10 billions of invested funds, and sometimes these are only tens of jobs and no more. So we need to provide that we have and we need to have more jobs, and we need to have well-trained staff. Another competition is the residents' lifestyle. For instance, in my region, we have very good universities and very good schools, secondary schools and high schools. So many young people enter the best universities of our country, but quite far away from our area. So it turns out that the best staff leaves our area. They do not only go to Moscow, St. Petersburg, they also go to the some national centers and big cities. So we'll lose these well-trained staff. I will not support one point of view of Bulat, who said that the cities are the points of development. This is not always like this. We have cities with rapid development, and we also have more agricultural areas and villages where there are jobs, where there are new trends for agricultural development. And it is most important that those people, well-trained staff who want to start agricultural development, they also need some more a new environment, not traditionally the environment of small towns and villages. So let us not forget that not only big cities, but these new points of development should have comfortable environment. Otherwise, we'll only concentrate on huge agglomerations. For instance, in the region of Perm, there is not only Perm, but Solikamsk, which is an agglomeration of its own. Alexander Prichalov and me have one agglomeration for both of us. Tchaikovsky city and Votkinsk are two cities on both benches of the Kama River. So this is a very good agglomeration too. Let me conclude. Answering your question whether the experience of Moscow and Kazan is applicable everywhere. Yes, it is, but let us apply these approaches to the new environment, not only to big cities, to huge agglomerations, but everywhere through all our countries. So each city or town, each village should have a chance. It is not important how big it is, only if each city and town, each subject can compete, then our country will develop and be rich. Thank you very much for your great speech, worth of the governor. So I would like you to wish all the success. And the governor should always say that each person should have a chance, and this is what I've heard in your speech. Concluding, I should say that these two presentations actually added different points to one another. They did not have controversial points, really. I do not mean that we've got to develop big cities and agglomerations of huge cities for smaller towns and villages. Agglomerations are different. Otherwise, we will not have anything but huge cities in 20 years. What is the problem, actually, of starting from 1980s, a lot of scientists have been criticized for stating villages were kind of not developing and not prospective areas. Since then, a lot has changed. And what is Russia? Is it the country of huge cities or villages too? Well, now big cities are developing more rapidly. It is the status quo, but let us not forget about small towns and villages too. And I would like to give the floor to Mikhail Dmitriev. He was the moderator of the previous session, so he had to moderate and not speak. And now you have the time to state your own point of view in the long run. Thank you very much, Vladimir. Let me come back to what you have discussed with Bulat Stolярov today. So should we go our own way or orient at the best examples of the world? There is an early joke about two guys discussing the ways for development. All of you know that. Actually, the answer to your question is yes, and on the one way. So there are developed countries, and let us target at trying to catch up with them. Sometimes the developing countries like India, they are now developing more rapidly than we, and it is impossible for us to go their way. So let us try to take the best from the experience of other countries, but different countries. So let us try to specify what we can support and try to catch up with the developed countries. Speaking about agglomerations, the situation is the same. We need to develop, and if we develop rapidly, then the populations of agglomerations with more than 1.5 million, they are now developing rapidly. So these are big agglomerations, but not as big as Moscow and St. Petersburg. So if they really succeed, it will be good. More people, more well-trained staff will come to these agglomerations, and by the year 2030, they will catch up with some similar agglomerations from different countries. What does it give? About 80 percent of added value in Russia. Let's look at Moscow and St. Petersburg, and we'll see a different picture. So during from 2010 to 2015, Moscow developed less rapidly comparing to other territories of the Russian Federation, and this is quite okay because Moscow is the most the most developed area in Russia. So it cannot develop as rapidly as other agglomerations, which are less developed. So what is our priority and what are we in for? Where is the clue for development? I still think that Moscow and St. Petersburg, and mostly Moscow, are the clues for development of the whole country and of this rank 2 agglomerations. Why so? A lot depends from Moscow. We need more funding of transport and housing in this rank 2 agglomerations, and territories and areas close to these cities. Without transport and without housing, they will not develop rapidly, but it requires about 1 billion rubles a year. And we cannot take this money from the budget, only from Moscow. Because the financial market is something very sensitive to politics and to the economic situation as well. And the center of it is in Moscow. Let's see the rating for the year 2016 for developing. Moscow and St. Petersburg are not the tops. Due to the development of financial sector. What does it mean? The majority of funding of non-raw material infrastructure, such as housing and transport, it is dependent on taxes a lot. For that, we need the market for securitization of the financial sector in Moscow. So what cities and towns of the second-rank agglomerations will develop? Production, yes, but not so much as something else. And these are the standard services: construction, real estate, and services linked to the real estate. Then the services for the population, B2B sectors, then also education and other services which are important for the population. Unfortunately, the problem is loans. They cannot have the loans as much as they need. Because what is credited in Moscow, where it is easy to get the loans? Industry, but not services. And here, the medium-sized businesses will have problems.
And to finance this kind of development through their own profit would be very difficult. They would need access to the financial sector resources, the non-liquid infrastructure bonds market. It's a key of access of the key industries of the second-tier cities to the bank lending. It can stop the development of these cities. It's a very serious challenge, and Again, the key is not in the cities themselves. It's about developing the financial market institutions in Moscow and St. Pete. And now the housing for the second-tier cities grow. We need a very big segment of the rental real estate. 186 million square meters. Mostly it's a modern rental places. They have to be built in 10 biggest agglomerations of the second tier in Russia. This kind of construction can be financed by securitizations of the future rental revenues, then eventually coming onto the high liquidity market of securities. We're hitting the same problems, and all this high scale of the developing urban infrastructure will require sharp increase of the engineering sector. Now, recently we've been speaking that in Moscow we have the global engineering company of the full cycle. It's almost engineering which has been formed. And these kind of companies will be actually supporting this kind of upscale of the construction industry. They cannot emerge separately in each of the cities. It will be all Russian operators, sometimes global operators. So we get the whole chain of development, which is beginning in Moscow, but it ends in the second-tier agglomerations. And in optimal case, it will give us until 2030 the aggregate 40 trillion Russian rubles of the value added, about a 0.8% in the average rate of economic growth additionally. But at the same time, another about 10 million rubles worth of economic growth can be obtained, exactly what Maxim Reshetnikov has been speaking about. It will be using the potentials of the growth of the labor productivity of the small cities, which are remoted from the major agglomerations, but still they have the spatial resources. Its historic heritage and natural resources, very advantageous geographical position on the border of China, for instance, or another location along the main transportation routes. Developing these kind of cities is not sensitive to the economy of scale. The resources will enable us to build the production with the maximum capabilities of production, even if it will be a relatively small settlement or a town. We should not forget about that, because otherwise we may lose our space. But by developing these cities and towns, we'll also mobilize the capabilities and potential of the spatial development in such a way. Really, the strategy of economic development of Russia right now, it's a strategy of non-oil and gas development of the major urban agglomeration, which is complemented by the maximum possible agglomeration. It's about increasing the potential output, attracting investment to the cities, which are not the part of the orbit of the major agglomerations. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now let's move from economics to the topics which are close to economics. And now we have Oksana Demchika, Director of the Department for Developing Urban Environment. It's an environment that I would like to emphasize. Could you please share? Generally speaking, the urban environment, is it more about money, or is it despite having lack of money? Thank you, Vladimir. Good morning, dear colleagues. I believe that the urban environment is about everything. It's about money, it's about events, and events with money. And I would second what has been mentioned by other presenters, even though they have been speaking about major or big institutions such as agglomerations, but still Maxim Reshetnikov and we are now discussing not only the issues of economy, but now we're also speaking about building life quality for people wherever they may be residing. Because indeed we, Russia, we are in the global trend of urbanization, and now we have 74% of our population who are living in big cities in Russian Federation. And we have a very significant decrease of the urban type settlements by 1,000 units across Russia. The urban settlements are decreasing even more by 20,000 of them. Less, and I would agree that we need pay attention to that and try to counteract these kind of negative processes, because given the special aspects of the Russian Federation, given the scope of our territory, we are a very big, lengthy country. So for us, it is very important that on our territory we could have the less blind spot where there is no humans, no life. And at this point, I would support what Maxim has said, that we have to think not only about cities, but also about the villages and countryside, the urban type settlements where people are living. They would like to keep living there, to stay there. They do not want to relocate elsewhere, nor to change their lifestyles. And people really become the key capital and asset for any country. And now it's a challenge of not only seeing people migrating within Russia, let's say from Novgorod to Moscow, or from Nizhny Novgorod to the city of Kazan. We have even bigger challenge, because now people are making a choice for their future residence outside of Russia. There is people leaving Russia for other places like Tokyo, Berlin, Paris, and other cities, because the quality of life in them may be way higher, and these cities can offer to people more opportunities respectively. And this is why we believe that undoubtedly when we work with our economy, with workspaces, we have to work with an environment where people live, because we are talking very extensively with the Mono Cities project and the foundation for developing mono cities. Whenever we're speaking about this kind of mono or single industry towns development, the people have made a certain discovery that even after you offer people quite a competitive salary and very good lifestyle and stability, it still is not an incentive for people to stay, because there is nothing interesting for people to see. It is not a good environment. There is no infrastructure for recreation. There are no parks. The city itself is becoming very gray, shady, dirty, and even if you have a big economic powerhouse in the city, it's not an anchor for a person. When a person is making decision, in 64% of cases when people make a decision to relocate, to move their city or town, they're not thinking about a job. They're thinking about what city I would like to live in. They study the city, they study different capabilities that a city can give them in terms of increasing their quality of life. As an example, can give you this notorious example of Detroit, which used to be a very strong industrial center. But after this economic decline took place in Detroit in the US, and when the core of this city, due to these economic reasons, became depopulated, and different type of marginal layers of society, shall we say, moved into the downtown Detroit, the city basically died, because the center of the city turned itself into slums. On the periphery, nobody is still living there. It's a one outstanding and infamous example of how quite successful city can end up. And we are convinced that this kind of territorial development, spatial development, is one of the biggest factors of economic growth. But still, I think it's also a factor for increasing quality of life on a particular territory and a city. So a priority project of building very comfortable environment for living is one of the priority development for the Russian Federation. And now we are with the Russian regions and their municipalities. We're on the stage one of deploying our priority project of building comfortable living conditions in each town and city. And here we are pursuing a number of challenges, and this could be the quick wins, small wins as we refer to them, and more long-term nature tasks. In terms of quick wins, speaking of 2017, what I would like to do, we need to put an order to our cities. It's what we are surrounded by, It's like sometimes it's a dirtiness and street lighting, order on the streets. It's something that we can do immediately and right on the spot, and it will affect our life whenever we leave our place of residence, be it an apartment or a house. And you may be aware of cleaning the yards and the adjacent areas of where people spend a lot of time. And people can spend this time with their friends and family. It's their backyards, public spaces and areas in towns and cities. So our immediate goal is to pay attention and to make a special focus on these territories. We have to start small. We have to build this micro, comfortable environment for people to live in, so that we could impress it on people that they live in a quality space. And we do understand that we have more or less similar problems among us. Sometimes it is about neglected parks and territories, poor maintenance of these territories, and quite aggressive environment for the limited mobility strata of population. There is no functional diversity in our cities and towns. Sometimes when we talk to our clients who live and colleagues who live in smaller towns, you know, the best place in a Russian smaller town would be the square next to us, town hall with a memorial to Vladimir Lenin. Usually, sometimes you can see street lights and maybe a couple of benches, and that's it. Otherwise, it's all represented in the asphalt pavements. It's very boring, it's dull, and there is no other places in this city to go. It's a status quo that we have. Sometimes these are poorly maintained parks and squares. There is no lighting, nor roads, and all of that. All of that has quite a negative impact on a person. A person may be financially successful. People want some diversity. People want to see some change. They want to see something beautiful and recreate. And this is not available to them in such a location. It's about environment. It's about the atmosphere and the quality, perception of the quality of life, which may play a defining role. That's why we need to pursue that. Another aspect, which I think is one of the key to our project, is whatever we do, the way we are building this environment, and what we do in this particular environment is still has to be discussed publicly, and people have to be a part of this discussion project. Because you can, and we have a lot of examples like that, when, let's say public servants are offering some projects. Let's make our city better. Let's build a fountain. Just to give you one example, let's upgrade a central square of a town. And local residents, they have different needs. What's important for people to build a park, or let's say people pin more importance, like in many cities and towns, they have special venues and facilities which are attraction points, informally though, for people. And sometimes people may perceive these locations and this building or a territory to be beautified and to be more comfortable for their free time. And these very aspects, when people, I'll rephrase myself, it's we need to choose these particular points, locations, events that we have to do when we're improving the landscape of the city. It's a key factor, because when people, when people are involved in this process, they're listened to. They're taken attention to, given attention to. People have different perceptions to these kind of ideas, and we have less vandalism about these objects. People are not going to destroy what is popular and what is needed. And thinking of the future, what else I would like to say? Some of my colleagues have mentioned it already. That generally speaking, we would like to build a new structure for city management and city development that would not be feasible without creating very strong professional teams, because these challenges that we are facing to local municipalities and city halls, those who are managing these residential areas, unless we build a new team of managers, those who will be involved in these processes and sharing these ideas will be known how to do that, then I think it will be very difficult to build the new urban environments or create terms and conditions for economic growth of our cities. So Vladimir Mao with the Russian Economic Academy, we are building the special educational programs for cities' mayors, which will be accounting for these old trends and new standards, so that the local mayors would be also involved in this, and they have to understand these modern requirements and these challenges which they may be facing, and also have enough instruments and leverage of how to build very good economic policies and policies of boosting quality of life in their cities, so that eventually they would go on the path of sustainable development, to be able to compete for people, to be able to preserve and maintain themselves as a municipality or a city. Thank you. Oksana? Like, trying to sum up what you said, if it'll be beautiful, it'll be livable. I guess this is the phrase. Jointly with the Russian Ministry, with the Housing Development Agency, we are building actually a new program to improve the living conditions in urban conditions. There'll be good introductory trips outside of Russia to see how it can be done. And for me, it was quite unexpectedly that the program for the managerial teams of the mono cities, mono towns, have been proved quite effective. We're doing it with the VEB Bank, and I would kindly like to invite you to take more proactive part. Of course, any city is not only about economy. Although people go to Moscow not to get a better environment, but to build their career and to get a job. They have done it so in the past, and they're doing it now. And speaking of the West, I think it's a main pulling factor and a motivation. And I think it's an important conversation, and we think it is very important not only to train mayors or certain leaders, but also to train, like you said, managerial teams, because it's only through a team effort we can implement some ideas, and that managerial team should include not only public servants and officials, but also a key business, which may not be town-forming business or local economic mainstream, but it's very significant for a city or a town. And we have some presence of the mayors and the heads of cities, namely Mr. Musai from Makhachkala. Could you please say, given all this specificity of the Republic of Dagestan and the city of Makhachkala, to what extent this discussion is relevant to your city?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues and dear guests of the forum. I'll try to say in short what Makhachkala and its agglomeration is. It was set up in 1857. Now we have more than 46 hectares and more than 1 million population. So today we are agglomeration. It has been completed, and we are trying to catch up with the development of agglomeration being humans. Mikhail and Elena have visited Makhachkala, and they know what has already happened in Makhachkala. Today there are 2 regions which are part of it. Keltsky, more than 140 hectares. The city of Kaspiysk, with more than 100,000 population. So these are 4 huge districts which are part of Makhachkala. But what has happened, and why do we have such huge migration? A lot of people from some faraway areas and from the mountains, from some villages. They have come to the city of Makhachkala. So we have about 800,000 population, and factually we have 1 million because we have people who come to Makhachkala every day. So what is important here? The development of transport, because Makhachkala has become the center of Dagestan and of the Caucasus as a whole. We have also a new airport with a brand new one. The transportation and logistic is so well developed. We have a lot of advantages. So the mere position and the geographic position on Makhachkala has made it the center of attraction. So what is and what are the sectors of the economy for Makhachkala? Kaspiysk is a platform for investment, and a lot of funds are invested there. The majority of factories and plants go from the center of the city to Kaspiysk. So today Makhachkala can compete with other big cities in many sectors of economy. Construction. Well, we develop rapidly, and a lot of facilities are constructed every day in our great city. Why is it like us? Unfortunately, more than 20 banks have been closed in our republic, and this worsens this situation. But still, we cover all these risks because the city is really attractive for investors. So it is kind of a balance between risks and opportunities. We have more opportunities, and risks, we've overcome them. And in the 1990s, the whole situation was unstable politically and economically, and it seemed to the majority of people there were no guarantees in those times. Today, we have a new team, and I absolutely agree with Bulat Stolярov. We are absolutely in line with the trends of development of all agglomerations. So we have a lot of instruments for development. Urbanization has happened, and it is the fact. We have more than 600 million rubles invested thanks to the transport development. We have very good railways and highways, and that is why we have new funds attracted. A lot of new municipal highways have been constructed. That be underlined once again. So sometimes we can complain we don't have enough money. Clear enough, we cannot compete with Moscow and St. Petersburg, but we have our own opportunities, and we're developing further. So thank you very much. If you have questions, I would gladly answer them. Thank you very much, more said. I would like to give the floor to Vitaly Kushnarov, responsible and head of administration of Rostov-on-Don city. Thank you very much, dear moderator. Rostov-on-Don has its peculiar features as the center of agglomeration. And this has happened due to its geographic position. It is located near Novocherkassk and Taganrog, and it is located on the bench of the river. It is the harbor of 5 seas, as we call it. Though it is quite a small city for a millionaire, it has only a bit more than 200,000 square kilometers. But we're developing, and the most important point for development is the development of the core of agglomeration, which is Rostov-on-Don, making its developing good and positive for the population, for the citizens. So what are we developing today? Recreation, transport, and we try to make different points of Rostov accessible for all the population of the territory. It is what is most important is not only recreation but business. So we try to make the structure of Rostov so that each point of Rostov are accessible. In the center, we are to set up new business centers and new jobs. What is the border of our agglomeration? So we have now a lot of highways connecting 3 poles, uniting the central areas and the peripheral areas of Rostov-on-Don. So we try to make up sustainable development of our city so that the areas of Rostov should be accessible. So we have Rostov, the city, and the so-called Greater Rostov, which has more than 1 million population. Transport and the hubs are also most important, and they will set up new hubs to develop further new business areas and new so-called Sputnik towns and parts of agglomeration. This year is going to be significant for Rostov because next year we'll have FIFA games in Rostov. We'll host some of the games of FIFA, and for that we're trying to modernize our city. We've started to construct a new airport from 0 point in the so-called Greater Rostov. That will be a great airport, and next to it there will be a new area for business and for accommodation. But this is not all. On the left bench of the river of Don, we are going now to construct a new area for sports, recreation, and living. So we also have a stadium there. Before the left side, the left bench of the river Don used to be a depressive area, and now it is one of the most rapidly developed area, like the central city, the central part of the city of Rostov-on-Don. We try to work in collaboration, and it is most important that the government of the Rostov-on-Don city and the area work together. The targets have been set up in our strategy 2020. In December 2011, a coordination council has been set up, and there are agents from the government and from the business as well. However, there are also barriers which hinder the sustainable development of the territory in the regulatory basis. Unfortunately, we don't have enough laws and sub-legal acts regulating this kind of the development of the area, providing Rostov-on-Don is the center of agglomeration, and it is responsible for the service of the whole agglomeration, and thus it has to have priority. Sorry, there is one question: who is going to pay for that? Because, you know, Moscow can also ask for additional funding and financial support. It also have a lot of additional functions, and Mikhail has said that Moscow is not successful enough in serving these additional targets. That is an interesting point, right? Supporting the centers, we can also, ask the oil production areas not to pay taxes, supporting them more. Well, I'm kidding, certainly, but it's actually a very serious question. Well, you know, answering your question, agglomeration is the way to manage the territories, and this is most important. And you know, territories development is not an administrative thing. We cannot just sign one decree or one law, but all the participants, all the actors should conclude and come to some balanced point of view. Thank you very much. I still just wanted you to ask my question further, but now I would like to give the floor Yarek Lalov, who is in charge of Ufa, which is a big city too. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Sergei Sobyanin and all of you for a superb organization shown at this great forum. It is my 5th time I've participated in this forum, and I would like to thank all of you once again. Let me highlight some specific issues which are mostly not part of plenaries, but actually they are very important for the global development of cities. You know, in July, in Primorsky area, during the Council of Mayors, there was something interesting. They reported a document, a new document, which is actually a new proposal. Today, some speakers have said that the most important stimulus for development is money. I think that the second important instrument is stop. Well, train stop, certainly. But taxes are important too. And the percentage of taxes which are accumulated in the cities are only 10 to 8%. UFA has set a lot of agreements with big cities of China. So our budget policy is so that 33% remains in the city, 33% goes to the Republican government, and 33% go to Beijing. Due to this collaboration. So this is what we have today. A lot of money goes to the federal center. And this is not that I am complaining of that. This is the status quo. If this is the budget policy of the Russian Federation, let me remind you what happened in the USSR. You know, before the Second World War, a little bit more than 200,000 people lived in the city of Ufa. Then two big cities started to be one, and in 1970s it has become a millionaire city. Everything was funded from the central government of the USSR, and that was transportation and housing. And I think that we've got to go back to those times in this issue. You know, we can have a lot of research, we can do a lot of training, but funds and resources are significant. So providing good experience of Russia, it is developing in a great and positive way, and I would like to thank Muscovites. So what we, you know, we have a lot of research in Bashkortostan, but everything goes to Moscow. It's good. And Moscow is the city which develops and stimulates a lot of production on many territories. For instance, something which is produced in Bashkortostan, it goes to Moscow. Something else is produced in Ufa, it goes to Moscow too. It is good, but we also want to develop. You know, the general plan of the USSR times was good. And now we're trying to make the strategy for 2030. And I would like to take a lot of features from that general plan. So we've got to make up and to set up the mechanisms to have this concept of development. Unfortunately, we have very little funding. It is not enough. Still, we've done a lot. 28 hotels have been constructed recently, and we are part of 3 major congress centers. So we are all the among top 3 congress centers in Russia, and it is great. One more advancement. We have 155 million rubles investment, and we used to have 62. But let us use the experience of Chinese cities. And we have, as I've said, 3 brother cities in China. We work together with them, and they are developing really rapidly. And, you know, all the engineering, all the transport, including highways and railroads, so the construction, all this is developing really rapidly and is supported by the state. And we can do the same only providing the funding and support from the center. You know, sometimes when we are asked who is constructing what, let us look at the experience of Chinese cities. Sometimes I ask them, who is constructing them? You're so successful, and they say, you know, it is all funded by Beijing. Let us use their experience. So these are 3 big cities. Well, they are comparable to Ufa. that these three Chinese cities are about 3 times bigger than Ufa. So Chinese wonder has its advantages and has its particular features. Let us use them.
If we were not mentioning Moscow and St. Petersburg, we have 13 such cities, million-plus cities. We have very good starting points, and given the support of the federal center, primarily methodological and financial support, we will see very solid development. And please do not forget about one thing. At each of my presentation, I'm saying this phrase: you and I live in northern countries. In Ufa, 220 days a year we have to provide heating systems, and we're the most northern agglomeration if you look at the world map. And when we speak about the beautification or providing of urban amenities, I can see many mistakes done by architects when we're trying to make an improvement on the level of Milan, Paris, or Mediterranean shore. Just imagine what kind of the beautifications they have in Norway, north of Finland, and north of Canada. It's quite modest. It's quite modest. It's done so that this municipal improvement would be affordable in terms of its maintenance for the cities, municipalities. Again, 1 square meters of the lawn is 12 times more expensive in maintenance than it's in Santa Margarita. 12 times more expensive, not to mention public amenities and utilities, etc. So we have beautiful ideas about how to make our cities more beautiful, how to improve them. We always have to keep in mind that it has to be very functional, convenient, beautiful, and safe, but it should be affordable. Thank you. I want to comment a lot of things, but time is running up. Alexei Prazdnichnik, would it be please very short? And also I would like to give the floor to one of our panelists to sum up the discussion. Dear colleagues, good morning. I'm the last one. Many ideas have already been articulated. Just a couple of things that I would like to draw your attention to. When we speak about regional policies in Russia, I think it has been over 20 years of experiments with different instruments, and throughout all of this time we've been speaking about what kind of model should we choose: gradual development, even development, and priority development. It's scary to be in the middle, to do neither the first nor the second, and I think that the Russian regional policy is stuck. While 15 years ago we've been setting a goal of making it a level, making it an even development in Russia. In Russia we have the biggest distinctions and sharp contracts between the cities. Alexei, could you please hold the microphone closer because we can barely hear you? So the life expectancy between the the gap between life expectancy between Russian regions is 17 years, which is unprecedented on the global scale. So I believe that it's a big question for me what kind of model we're using in Russia. And here I would like to support Maxim that in his stance that when we speak about regional policies, the more adopted, the better approach would be a more balanced model of regional development, which implies on one hand focus on leading regions which can develop more rapidly, but on the other hand we have to minimize the differences. But you have to understand what kind of differences, not in economic development between the regions, but in providing basic and necessary services, education and healthcare. 10 years ago we've seen the global change, that differences within one country, between the regions of one country, were greater than differences between the countries. At the same time, differences in social development, in healthcare and educations are shortening, becoming narrower. So when we speak about regional policies, and let's talk about cities and municipalities, yes, in many countries regional policies have been oriented at the regions, and so the keywords like infrastructure, growing points, and budget relations, that was a main idea of a regional policy. But in the last 10 years we can see again the change of this trend, and now many countries adopting new federal policies. Namely, it's an urban federal policy. It's a paradoxical phrase. It's really strange to hear. But the idea is very simple. The regions are becoming ever more important driver for economic growth. But on the other hand, the system of interbudgetary relations, what the mayor of the city of Ufa said, that no correct relations, interbudgetary relations, will give cities enough financial resources to be competitive on a global scale. And this is why lately, thinking of Germany, Poland, Australia, Malaysia, these countries are launching federal or national urban policies. And this is why it's a new and hot topic. It's a new question for Russia, because if you think about what the Federation has been involved in lately, it's mega sporting events, historic events in different capacities related to urban development. The second Russian topic was supporting mono cities, single industry towns, and then now the new project developing urban environment. So the new federal agenda, urban agenda, is the new task within the strategy. We have to invent and to implement this new policy. Now a couple words about the content of the federal and regional policies. They have three key aspects in different countries. They're all the same, and you've mentioned each of them. Number one is correct authorities, correct budget relations. The cities have to manage resources which will ensure their economic development, urban planning, real estate, etc. So we can see the disbalance which have been growing in the last 5 years. It's a step number one. Question number two. Even if we'll streamline interbudgetary relations, there is a different evaluations about what kind of resources you have to spend on the key cities, what Bulat has mentioned. These numbers, you can play with numbers, but no system of interbudgetary relations will enable us to do that. We need a new financial resource for developing our cities. Mikhail is absolutely correct. It is not a must that all the resources have to be budgetary and federal. If we'll have the very well developed financial markets, we'll have the new financial instruments, infrastructure, housing, etc. The share of federal resources will shrink. But the second goal, there'll be no miracles. The cities will not be developing if there'll be no investments, if they will not be given way more finances by the order of magnitude. It's a second area of focus. And the third thing is leadership. At different sessions, we've heard many examples, like two cities standing across the river or 100 kilometers apart from one another can be different drastically, simply because in one city there is a team that can create a miracle, and in another city there is a team which is complaining, blaming everything and everyone. It's about fundamental difference. Developing urban teams and supporting their professional level is a huge challenge and a big goal which we have to work on. So I can see three elements. The first, we have to reload budgetary relations, the new federal financial resources for urban development projects, and the new professional level of urban teams. These would be the new pillars on which you can build the urban policies. Thank you very much. Thank you. I absolutely have to comment it. It's quite disarming prospects that you've drawn here. And one thing is clear, there'll be no other interbudgetary relations, there'll be no money. But as for the teams, it depends on the God. As the Savior was saying, only by fasting and prayer you can cure this kind of diseases. Bulat, maybe you'll sum up our discussion. Vladimir, thank you. Fasting and prayer is absolutely a must. And speaking of that, putting it on a more serious note, I think it is very important to add a reality touch, a reality check, if you will, to develop or not to develop the key agglomerations in Russia. You know, thinking of our colleagues from Rostov, I absolutely have to say the following, that our colleagues from Rostov has described this agglomeration of Rostov. It's is over the area of the Tokyo with its 37 million residents. It just doesn't happen like that. The territory of Rostov agglomeration, as it is shown in the territorial scheme plan, is increasing the core of the city 55 times. There is no such a thing. There is no such agglomeration. It does not exist. Or you and I are talking about agglomerations and the core of the city with all the animals and all the flora and fauna, but then you call the things what they are. So I believe that to be able to deliberate, to be able to reinvent any programs, any financial systems for agglomerations of Russia, we first have to sort out this dilemma of 2014. We do not have agglomerations as described as they are described. They have to be redescribed. Thank you very much. Colleagues, thank you to all the participants. We're done. Have a good day.